Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne Becerra. I'm here from the Green Communities Program, and with me is Katelyn Kelly from the Renewable Energy Program here at DOER. And we're here to present on the Massachusetts SMART program, particularly geared for municipalities. A little bit about the Green Communities Division. Those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are the point of contact for all clean energy issues for municipalities. You don't have to be a green community to access our programs, but we're here to help all cities and towns. We do have our designation and grant program. We have 210 green communities right now, but we also provide a free online energy tracking and benchmarking tool called Mass Energy Insight. And that's free to all cities and towns, school districts, and water districts. We have municipal energy technical assistance grants, which are, again, available to all cities and towns and school districts. We provide assistance with energy management services, procurement, and oversight. And we have a information-packed website, as you can see on your screen. If you don't get our e-blast through email, please sign up to do so. That way you'll find out more about future webinars and other programs. We have an awesome team out in the field. We have 4 regional coordinators that are squatting in DEP regional offices throughout the state. Jim Barry is in the Western region. Neil Duffy is in the Northeast region. Seth Pickering is in the Southeast region, and Kelly is in the Central region. If you are not familiar with these folks, please reach out to them. If you have any energy issues for your city or town, they are there to help. Some upcoming events, we actually have another webinar scheduled for next month. We're going to be talking about zero energy or zero energy ready new construction for municipalities. If you're thinking about building a new building or a school building, this may be something of interest. And we also have some Mass Save listening sessions scheduled in the next few weeks throughout the state. This webinar is being recorded, and we will post it on our website in about 48 hours. There's a handy-dandy camera icon on the top of your right-hand screen. If you find a slide you find particularly of interest, you could take a picture of it and save it. And also there's a Q&A icon on your screen to type in questions as we go. Due to the fact that we have a information-packed presentation here, we may not get to a live Q&A at the end of the presentation, but please do type in your questions and they will all be answered and posted along with the webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Katelyn Kelly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katelyn Kelly. I'm a Renewable Energy Program Coordinator at DOER, and I'm here to tell you about the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program, or SMART. So just kind of a quick overview of the presentation and links to other program resources. So this is an updated slide deck. Some of it may be subject to change as we are continuing the process of defining and detailing this program, but you can find more information on our website, on the DOER website. You can also find information on our Solar Program Administrator's website. That's the masmartsolar.com website. And then you can also look at the DPU file room website, and that's where the tariff docket is being held. So every single piece of information that's been filed can be found through that link. It's docket number 17140. Just go to the file room and type in 17-140, and that'll bring you to the SMART tariff. So first, I'm sure what's on top of everybody's minds is what's going on with SREP 2. So SREP 2 is continuing to be extended until the SMART program begins. So I'm sure everybody has heard about the March 31st date. So what does that mean exactly? Essentially, SREP 2 is not stopping on March 31st. SREP 2 will continue until the SMART program begins. It will remain in effect. However, projects that are currently qualified and are not fully constructed by March 31st or mechanically complete will receive a reduced SREC factor. So we will still qualify projects after March 31st, but if you are over 25 kW, the SREC factor that your project qualifies for will be slightly lower. And to remain qualified under SREC 2, when the SMART program begins, you will have to submit an application and be fully constructed by the start of the SMART program. So just a quick overview of the basic features of the SMART program. It's a 1,600 megawatt AC declining block tariff program, and we differentiate it between all the different utility service territories in the state. So basically, each utility service territory will have its own individual block. Not all of them have 8 blocks, as you'll see further on in the presentation, but in total it's 1,600 megawatts. We differentiate in the tariff term based on the project size. So if you have a project that's 25 kW AC or less, you'll have a 10-year term. If you have a project that's over 25 kW, you'll have a 20-year term. And basically the compensation structure is differentiated between behind the meter and standalone facilities. And then for over 25 kW projects, you can add compensation rate adders for eligible facilities. So we have location-based adders, off-taker-based adders, an energy storage adder, and a solar tracking adder. We also have the energy storage adder available for those small systems of 25 kW or less. And then everything under SMART, it's a maximum eligibility of 5 megawatts AC per parcel. The initial base compensation rates were established using the results of a procurement for larger projects that we ran at the end of last year. So a base compensation rate is based on a system size. So we have established unique compensation rates for different size systems in each block of each utility service territory. And the way that the program begins, your compensation rate encompasses both energy and encompasses the incentive. So standalone facilities can elect to receive your energy compensation through one of 3 mechanisms, either through net metering, if the net metering cap space is available and you qualify, as a qualifying facility through the established QF tariff. That's essentially on the energy side you're receiving what amounts to a wholesale rate. And then our new proposed alternative on-bill crediting mechanism, which is currently being approved along with the SMART tariff. So that's a new program design that we created for the SMART program, basically allowing a form of virtual net metering without actually having net metering. It's not proposed to be made available to projects that are going behind the meter, but really for those large standalone projects that would be virtually net metered but are unable to access net metering.
Bear with us. Yep. We have a slide frozen. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Another additional program features. So as I mentioned before, we have adders, and one category of adders, location-based adder. So this is part of our overall policy goal of basically getting ideal project locations. So we're really using a carrot and a stick method. So we have the carrot by having additional adders for preferred locations, and then we have greenfield subtractors. So if you're building a large greenfield ground-mounted system that doesn't meet certain eligibility criteria, you'll have a portion of the total incentive deducted. And then we also are incorporating energy storage into the program design. So we designed a pretty unique adder for energy storage systems paired with PV. It's a variable adder, and we'll have more detail later on in the presentation, but we do have some minimum performance standards to apply because we want to ensure that there are grid benefits that are realized. The solar program administrator, who you've probably heard mentioned, maybe you've emailed them with some questions. ClearResult was chosen as a solar program administrator last November. They are partnering with Clear Power Research to utilize its PowerClerk platform. So basically, this was a way to collect a lot of information about these projects that are being submitted as part of the application. The state has utilized PowerClerk before. It's a great platform, so we were happy to see ClearResult partner with them. So ClearResult will be responsible for reviewing the applications and managing the block reservations, and they'll essentially be calculating what the tariff rate is for each of the projects that are qualified. So they'll make recommendations to DOER and to the electric distribution companies on a project eligibility, and then they will also be hosting the public interface and platform, but we'll have a separate website and also an application portal. So again, I mentioned before, if you go to masmartsolar.com, that's the website, and the application is not yet live. So how do you know what your project will qualify for? What is your project's total compensation rate? So there are a lot of different variables. It depends on where the project is located and which electric distribution company's service territory. It has been mentioned before, municipal light districts are not eligible for the SMART program, so you do have to be in one of the Eversource territories, National Grid, or Unitil. It depends on which capacity block you are eventually qualified under. So we start at the highest under block 1, and then the rates decline by 4%, and we're just going to keep moving projects down the line as they're submitted. So there's not going to be a start and stop. It's just going to be a smooth transition between the blocks. It also depends on how, It also depends on how big your project is. As I mentioned before, we differentiate for the base compensation rates based on the size of the project. And then, do you qualify for any adders? Are you subject to a greenfield subtractor? And then finally, are you a behind the meter facility versus standalone facility? So the behind the meter versus standalone won't actually impact what we're calling your all-in base compensation rate, but it does impact how you're actually receiving that incentive payment and how that incentive payment is calculated, because we do have a slightly different method of calculating it, whether or not you're behind the meter, serving on-site load, or a standalone facility. So these are the capacity block sizes for each of the different utility service territories. So they're differentiated based on the amount of load served in each service territory. So as you can see, Eversource East and National Grid have the largest capacity block allocations because they serve the largest amount of load in the state. You can also see both Nantucket and Unitil, Fitchburg Gas and Electric, have fewer than 8 blocks. So you'll probably, when we get to the compensation rates later, you'll notice since they do have fewer than 8 blocks, the decline between the blocks will be greater than a 4% decline, so that it matches what we established as the 4% decline for 8 blocks. So these are the results of the competitive procurement. The competitive procurement was set to go out for about 100 megawatts, essentially half of that first block across the state. Each company, again, solicited an amount proportional to their load share. We announced the results in January, and they were used to establish the base compensation rates for Block 1 in each service territory. So basically, in each utility service territory, as you can see, we had a large amount of megawatts solicited. In National Grid and in Eversource West, or WMEGO, we did have highly competitive results. They were fully subscribed. And then in Nantucket, Fitchburg Gas and Electric, and then in Eversource East, or the NSTAR service territory, we didn't get as much of a response, so we actually set the compensation rates for those. So these are the rates across all the service territories. So again, you can see it depends on, this is just for Block 1, how large your project is, and then which service territory you're in. So back to the compensation rate adders. We have 4 categories of adders. We have location-based, off-taker-based, energy storage, and solar tracking. Projects over 25 kW can qualify for one adder from each category. So you can get more than one adder on your project, but you can't qualify for more than, for 2 location-based adders, for instance. You can do location and off-taker and add some energy storage. For projects 25 kW or less, they can qualify for the energy storage adder, but they cannot qualify for location, off-taker based, or the solar tracking adder. We did create a bunch of guidelines to help the market and to help applicants understand how their project may qualify for certain adders. Right now, the guidelines are still in draft form. We had them out for public comment earlier this month, and we did receive those public comments. So you can see the current draft version and all the comments we received on our website, and the link's right there. And we should be coming out with the final version of the guidelines within the next few weeks. And these are the adder values. So I do want to establish that these are the initial adder values. We are creating tranches for each of the adders. So initially we'll have 80 megawatts for each adder tranche, and then the adder value will decline. So what do we mean by tranche? Basically, we're going to be tracking how many megawatts of community shared solar projects are being qualified across the state. So it's across all of the utility service territories. So once we reach 80 megawatts of community shared solar, that 5 cents will decline by 4%. So basically, the first tranche is 80 megawatts, and then DOER will announce how big the second tranche is. So it may be 80 megawatts, it may be less, but each tranche will decline by 4%. Land use categories. So in determining your land use category, this is figuring out whether or not the project you're looking to build is going to have a greenfield subtractor applied to it. So basically, if you are in category 1, you have no greenfield subtractor. So this is an ideal site. Category 2, you'll have a partial greenfield subtractor, and then category 3, you have a full greenfield subtractor. So you can see that we are calculating the subtractor as a 100th of a cent per acre impacted, and that's a reduction on the overall tariff rate. So how are we measuring the acreage impacted? So right now we're proposing that the acreage impacted is determined by the square footage of the PV panels. So just literally, what is the square footage of all of the panels that are being installed, and you add those up, and that's the acreage impacted. It's determined based on multiple factors, including but not necessarily limited to whether the system is located on land and agricultural use, what's the size, is it ground mounted, what is the existing condition of the land, and what's the zoning of the land. So again, this is one of the guidelines we developed to provide some further information and clarity on determining how your system might be categorized. So category 1, so this is the no greenfield subtractor applied. This is the preferred siting. So basically, we do differentiate category 1 projects based on whether or not a project is located on agricultural land or non-agricultural land. So if your project is located on agricultural land, the only way you cannot be subject to a subtractor is if you're building a dual use agricultural solar tariff generation unit, a building mounted unit, or are sized to meet no more than 200% of the annual operation load of the facility. So land and agricultural use is essentially land that's been enrolled in the Chapter 61A tax incentive program, either currently or in the past 5 years, or whether it's installed on prime agricultural farmland. So that is a GIS data layer, and it's defined by how the soil itself is actually classified. So if you go onto the Mass Oliver system, you can just kind of click through and find the prime ag data layer to look at the site. And then if your facility is not located on farmland, you can get category 1 and no greenfield subtractor if you are 500 kW or less, building mounted unit, sited on brownfield, landfill, or if you've been built on land that's been previously developed as defined by DOER, or on land that complies with local zoning that explicitly addresses solar. Category 2, land. So this is kind of the half greenfield subtractor. So if you are built on land that's not been previously developed, but is zoned for commercial and industrial use. And category 3 is essentially everything else. So if you don't meet category 1 or 2, you're in category 3 and you're subject to the full greenfield subtractor. So as I was mentioning before, how we're calculating the actual incentive and how it's paid is determined by whether the system is a standalone or behind the meter. So for standalone facilities, basically this is your virtual net metering facilities. We're looking at how are you getting compensated for your energy. So are you getting a net metering credit, an alternative on-bill credit, or a QF rate? And then we just subtract that out from your all-in tariff payment, and then the remainder is what you're getting paid on the tariff side. For behind-the-meter systems, it's a little more complicated. So basically, for behind-the-meter systems, we're assuming that you're gaining your energy value by the energy served on site. And so the value is actually the avoided cost of the payment you would make to the utility company for every kilowatt hour you're using from your solar facility, as opposed to the kilowatt hour you're taking from the grid. So we do a one-time calculation to determine a fixed incentive payment per kilowatt hour for behind-the-meter facilities. So for standalone facilities, again, the tariff is intended to account for both energy and for incentive compensation. So for a standalone facility, it depends on whether or not you're getting that net metering credit, alternative on-bill credit, or the QF rate, essentially. So the way to think about it is that for every standalone facility, if you have a net metering facility, an alternative on-bill credit facility, and a QF facility, they're all essentially getting paid the same amount, just what they're getting on the energy side and what they're getting on the incentive side may differ, but if you have 3 projects that all are eligible for a 20-cent tariff, they'll all always get 20 cents. It's just the value you're getting on the net metering credit may be different from the value you're getting as a QF rate. So the QF project will get more on the incentive side than the energy side, but the total amount will always be the same. Next. So this is just a quick example of how the incentive is calculated. So say you have a 500 kW system in block 1, and it's a solar canopy, so you have the adder, and because it's a canopy, there's no greenfield subtractor, and it's a net metering facility. So the net metering credit value is about 20 cents, but it qualifies for a smart tariff rate of about 27.25 cents. So for the 20-year term, they're always going to get in total at least 27.25 cents. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see it. Basically, what's shown in red is the actual incentive payment. What's shown in blue is the energy payment. So you're always going to get the same amount from energy plus incentive. Just, if energy prices go up, what you're getting on the energy side is going to increase, and what you're getting on the incentive side is going to decrease. But when you add them together, it's always the same. So for behind-the-meter facilities, again, it's intended to account for energy and incentive, but we're doing an estimated value of the energy. So we're saying, okay, you're serving on-site load, you're not paying for energy that's coming directly from the grid. So that has value. How do we assess that value? We assess the value by taking the 3-year average of the basic service rate and then your current volumetric charges for distribution, transmission, and transition. So the value of that energy is determined by where you're interconnected and the utility company that you are being served by and you are serving. So it will differ based on where you're interconnected, but it'll basically change right now about once a year for the basic service 3-year average. So when your system is interconnected, at that point in time, when you become operational, we're going to look at what rate do you qualify for under the smart tariff, and then what is the value of that energy. So what's the value assessed to the 3-year average of basic service plus your current volumetric charges. And you subtract out the energy value to get, and the difference is now a fixed incentive payment that you'll get for the life of the tariff. So basically, you're setting up a fixed direct payment for the entire term of the tariff. So again, just an example of how this is calculated for kind of around the same size facility as we were looking at before. 500 kW under National Grid, so it's 25.5 cents. It gets the 2-cent building mounted adder, so it's about 27.5 cents. Connected on a G1 rate class, so say the value of energy for the G1 rate class is 18 cents per kilowatt hour. The incentive rate is now set at 9.5 cents, and that's the fixed incentive rate for every kilowatt hour of solar production for 20 years, regardless of what happens to electric rates over that time frame. So we're really looking at a snapshot in time of your energy rates and figuring out, okay, what would you be getting at this point in time? And that's now fixed. So if you go to the next slide, you can see. So really, in this instance, you're receiving what is in red, what is the incentive payment. So your cash flow is just your fixed incentive payment, but you're still getting value from the energy served behind the meter because that's avoided cost value for the energy. So how do you submit a statement of qualification application under SMART? So the portal itself will be open following the issuance of the order on the model tariff by the DPU. So we'll announce basically what the first day of applications will be when the model tariff order is issued. So on that day, it's going to be a little bit different from the rest of the program. We're going to order applications according to the date that the ISA is fully executed by both parties. So that's the interconnection service agreement for the project. And on the second day and thereafter, applications are ordered based on first come, first served basis for complete applications. And again, the projects and applications are assigned to blocks on a rolling basis, so they'll continue to fill and decline with the number of applications received. And applicants really must make sure that the application is thorough and complete. So when you're submitting the application, make sure you have all of your documentation to meet the minimum application requirements, and all the information is filled out. So the minimum eligibility criteria for small systems is you have to have your executed contract with the solar installer and then a customer disclosure form for every small system. So we actually drafted the customer disclosure form and we put it out for comment, basically just making sure that ratepayers and customers are fully informed and aware of the contract that they're signing. So we just kind of have the installer list out basic terms of the contract and have the customer signed. If you are seeking a low-income based compensation rate, then you have to show that you're you're on a low-income residential utility rate. If it's a third-party owned system, you have to have an executed power purchase agreement. And then you get a 12-month reservation period. So basically, you submit the application, and you have to be built or operational within 12 months. For over 25 kW, for basically your large systems, you have to have a fully executed interconnection service agreement, proof of site control, all non-ministerial permits, and then any documentation to support the land use category the project is seeking. And then we do have some project segmentation rules. So if you are subject to an exception to those rules, providing evidence for that. And then any other eligibility documentation for any adders you may be seeking. And again, you get a 12-month reservation period. You essentially just have to be constructed by the end of that 12 months to retain your qualification and to retain the rate that you qualified for in that block. So when you're submitting an SQA, what do you need to submit for each of the different adders? So a site plan for building mounted projects, and then if you're looking to do floating solar, brownfields, you just need to get a predetermination letter, and then for dual use agricultural projects, also predetermination letter. For off-taker-based adders, you don't need to provide proof of eligibility from a lot of these projects until you're actually operational. So for most of the community solar, Schedule Z and the customer disclosure forms. And then for low-income property, public entities, you just have to show that you're actually sited on an eligible property. The energy storage adder is for energy storage paired with PV. So as I was saying before, it's a variable adder, and it's based on the ratio of the storage capacity to the solar capacity, as well as to the duration of the battery itself. So the way it's being calculated, we have a base adder rate of 4.5 cents, and it's a component of a formula. So this, again, the base adder will decrease by 4% per adder tranche. And then this adder is also available to all systems, not only just your large systems. So residential systems that are looking to install a residential sized battery would be eligible for this adder. So again, more details can be found in our guideline, which is currently in a draft form. So this complex formula just is basically what we're doing to calculate what the adder should be for different size projects. So it's more important what the output is rather than what the input is. So we'll go to the next slide so we can show that. So this is basically the energy storage adder, different projects would be eligible for based on the size percentage threshold and then the rated capacity of the duration of the battery. So it's a minimum, so on the top it's in hours, so it's a minimum of 2 hours up to a maximum of 6 hours. And then for the ratio of the battery size to the PV size, it's a minimum of at least 25%. So if you have a 100 kW PV installation, then you have to have at least a 25 kW battery to be eligible for the adder, and then up to 100%. So we do have some operational requirements on the battery. Basically, we want people to be using these batteries. We don't want them to just be for resiliency. So we have some minimum and maximum rated power, minimum and maximum useful energy, minimum efficiency requirements of 65% round trip efficiency. And then we are going to request that applicants provide historical 15-minute interval performance data to the solar program administrator for the first year of operation. And they also have to discharge at least 52 complete cycle equivalents throughout the year. So again, this is just, we want you to actually be using this battery, because that's how you really get the most grid benefits, is by using batteries. It's not just having it there as a backup. So the SQA application process I outlined before is how you submit an application to reserve your space in the block. And then you don't start getting paid for the tariff at that point unless you're actually operational when you're initially submitting your application. So you get paid for your tariff when you basically resubmit and you come back to the solar program administrator showing that you are operational, have been issued your authorization to interconnect by the utility company, and most importantly, that you still meet the criteria for the project that you got qualified for. So you can't build a project for more capacity than you reserved, besides a de minimis increase. So basically, if you have a slight increase on the DC side, but not the AC side, so basically as long as your inverter is not changing, but maybe your panels are slightly different, a little bit higher. We also have a requirement that all systems over 500 kW have to provide a professional engineer certification performance standards in the construction of the project. So again, if you refer back to our land use and siting guidelines for details on that, we do have a set of criteria that has to be met and certified to in the construction of these projects. And then they also have to comply with all terms of the tariff itself. So what is the tariff? I'm sure many of you have heard about what's happening at the DPU, maybe confused about, well, I thought the DOER already designed the program, what's going on with the DPU. So we did design the program. The regulations are final. However, because it's a tariff and the incentive is being paid to you by the utility companies, they need to get cost recovery approval from the Department of Public Utilities so that they can pay you. So what's happening right now is essentially each of the utilities have proposed a way to recover those costs, and there are also some other issues that are being discussed, but the DPU needs to approve it. So basically it was filed back in September, and we're waiting on the DPU to approve this tariff for the program to go into effect. So basically, the tariff is designed to track closely with our regulations. So essentially, the criteria for qualifying for this program lies under the DOER's jurisdiction. But there are some components of this program that do need to be approved by the DPU itself, including the alternative on-bill mechanism, which is completely new, how payments will be paid to generators and to system owners, metering requirements, and then tariff enrollment requirements. So right now, it's a joint model tariff filing. So it's been jointly filed by all the utility companies. And then we'll be getting an order on that. And then each of the utility companies individually will need to file what's called a compliance tariff. And once those compliance tariffs that are actually approved is when the program will go into effect. So this is just an updated schedule of where we stand with the proceeding. For those who have been closely tracking this and following this, you'll probably notice that the schedule has been delayed due to the recent storms. So that has impacted scheduling and also each of the utility companies' ability to kind of be responsive and to attend to hearings. So basically, we do have a delay of about 3 weeks from our original schedule, but we're ready to move forward, and the hearings will begin at the end of March, and we're scheduled to right now have 4 evidentiary hearings, so that'll start on March 29th, and those will end on April 5th. And then once we conclude that process, we go through the briefing process. So people keep asking, well, when will the order come out? At this point, we don't know. The DPU is beholden to no one's schedule but their own. But from the schedule, we can see that the final date in this proceeding is May 21st. So that's the date that the companies or the EDCs have to file their reply briefs, their final reply briefs. And from that point, the DPU usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks. Again, that is kind of a basic timeline. They could go faster, they could go longer. We won't know until they actually release an order. But if you're wondering about timing, we're probably looking into more of the mid-summer range for when the SMART program will actually begin. And that's it.
We have time for questions.
Yep.
Okay.
So we do have some time for questions. If anybody has questions, you can submit questions in the I think through the webinar platform, through the chat function.
Do you want me to read the questions? Nothing in yet. Okay.
Okay, so first question is, will this program eliminate the RPS for solar? So this program, so we will no longer have the solar carve-out program, but solar will still qualify under our overall Class 1 RPS, which is not ending. All these projects will actually be qualified as RPS Class 1 projects, but the RECs associated with that qualification will go to the utility companies directly in exchange for the incentive payment. Okay, so again, we had a question about what happens with the RECs associated with these projects. So the RECs will actually go to the utility companies directly. The incentive tariff payment is in exchange for RECs, essentially. So they will have full ownership of the RECs for the entire term of the tariff. Once you get to the end of the term, the REC ownership rights will go back to the system owner.
Might want to let them know that we can't discuss specific utility questions.
So I think that's about it for now. I know we didn't get to all the questions that were submitted, but we'll be looking at anything that's submitted in writing or closely following this, and we'll provide some response. Yeah. And that can be found on the Green Communities website?
Yeah, yes, on the webinar section of the website. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, our next webinar is going to be on April 26th, and it's about zero net energy new construction. So thanks a lot, and happy spring. Bye-bye.